I always thought my marriage was unshakable. That's what made the betrayal hit even harder. My wife, Lillian, and I had been together for almost a decade. We had built a life, a home, and a future, or at least, I thought we had. The first red flag was subtle. Lillian started smiling at her phone more than at me. She'd brush off my questions about who she was texting, saying it was just a group chat with coworkers. Then she started working late. At first, I believed her. Why wouldn't I? But over time, the excuses piled up, and I couldn't ignore the unease creeping into my gut. One evening, my friend Jake casually mentioned seeing her at a cafe across town during one of her supposed overtime nights. And she wasn't alone. That was the moment I knew something was deeply wrong. Instead of confronting her right away, I played it smart. I checked our shared phone bill and saw a recurring number that she was calling late at night. I did a reverse lookup, no name, just a burner phone. That made it worse. My stomach turned, but I needed undeniable proof. So I set a trap. The next weekend, she told me she had an out-of-town business seminar. I pretended to believe her, kissed her goodbye, and then followed her. She didn't even make it out of the city. Instead, she went straight to a hotel where she met a guy, some wannabe Casanova who looked like he walked out of a gym advertisement. I felt sick, but I didn't act on impulse. Instead, I documented everything. Photos, timestamps, even a video of them walking into the hotel together. I gathered texts from her phone. She had gotten too comfortable, leaving it unlocked on the counter. I compiled it all neatly into a file. Then came my masterpiece, the letter. A cold, clinical, factual takedown of her lies. I sent it to her family, a few of our mutual friends, and since she had been using company hours to sneak around, even to her boss. I made sure she would have to face the full consequences of her actions. The day she came home, she found her belongings in black trash bags outside the door. The locks were changed, and my lawyer had already drafted divorce papers. When she read the letter, she broke down, sobbing, trying to explain. I didn't give her the satisfaction of a response. She had already said enough through her actions. Her life unraveled fast. Her family turned on her, our friends distanced themselves, and her job was suddenly not so stable. Meanwhile, I moved forward. I focused on myself, on rebuilding my confidence, and on finding happiness outside of a toxic relationship. Revenge isn't always about destroying someone. Sometimes, the best revenge is letting them destroy themselves while you thrive. But let me take a step back and tell you exactly how I made sure she felt every ounce of betrayal she had inflicted on me. The night I discovered her cheating, I barely slept. My mind was racing, replaying every moment we had shared, every promise she had made. How could she throw it all away so easily? I wasn't about to let her get away with it without consequences. I decided to gather more evidence. I installed a small voice recorder under the passenger seat of her car. It wasn't illegal in my state as long as one party was aware of the recording, and since it was my car, I had all the right in the world. Within 3 days, I had more than enough proof, intimate conversations, meet-up plans, even her bragging about how clueless I was. That was the final straw. I wasn't just going to end things. I was going to expose her for who she truly was. After compiling all my evidence, I scheduled a dinner with her family and a few close friends. I told her it was a special night, that I wanted to celebrate our love. She looked so excited, thinking I had something romantic planned. The moment everyone arrived, I played the recordings. The room went silent. Her mother gasped, her father clenched his jaw, and Lillian? She turned ghostly pale. Tears welled up in her eyes as she muttered, "Please, let's talk about this privately." I wasn't having it. Why should we talk in private, Lillian? You weren't exactly private about your little affair, were you? She tried to defend herself, to spin it in a way that made her the victim, but the evidence was undeniable. One by one, our friends started leaving, shaking their heads in disappointment. Her parents looked at her like they didn't even recognize their own daughter. That was just the beginning of her downfall. The next day, I filed for divorce and sent the evidence to her boss. Turns out, her workplace had a strict policy about personal affairs interfering with work conduct. She was fired within a week. With nowhere to go, no job, and no friends left willing to support her, she finally reached out to me. A pathetic, teary message begging for another chance. I left her on read. Now, Months later, I've moved on. I've met someone who actually respects and values me. And Lillian? She's just a distant, painful memory of a lesson well learned. If there's one thing I know for sure, it's that karma has a funny way of balancing things out. And in this case, I didn't have to do much. Lillian's own choices were the cause of her downfall. And I walked away stronger than ever.